On the 14th of December 2023, I took my Shahada and became a Muslim. In this video, I'm going to tell you my story and how I went from being an atheist all the way to being now a Muslim. So I think it's important to start from how I actually became an atheist in the first place. I was born in the UK and went to a Catholic school, Catholic oriented. I don't think it was specifically a Catholic school, but we would sing the typical Christian songs every morning in assembly, and most of the people who went to that school were Christian. So I grew up in a fairly Christian environment, but it wasn't pushed. My family wasn't very religious at all. My dad, I don't think, had any religion. I don't really know at the time. My mother came from a Catholic background and claimed she was a Catholic, but didn't really practice at all. I'd go to church sometimes, but that was mostly because of friends who would invite us. But I wasn't pushed into any religion at a young age. At the age of 7, my parents broke up, and a few years later, I was taken to Peru because my mum was half Peruvian and she wanted to take us back to Peru. So me, my brother, my sister and my mum went to Peru. Arriving in Peru, I didn't know any Spanish. Didn't really know much about the culture, and I was put into a country that was extremely Catholic. The first school I went to was called the Colegio de Jesus, which translates to the School of Jesus. And I don't mind saying that because there's probably hundreds of them in the whole country. It was really daunting because in Peru, especially in the poorer regions or the not so high-end schools, like the one that I went to, the Colegio de Jesus, there's not many English people or American or foreigners at all. So when we went to that school, I believe we were the only British people who have ever been to that school, which meant we stood out a lot during the playtime, during free time when we could go out into the playground or whatever. We would get hoarded by other students just wanted to have a look at us because we were different, we were English. I was at that school for a few months. I was finishing off my 5th year of education, and at the end of that year I completed my 5th year of education, and I changed schools to another school which was not as religious but still had a very strong emphasis on religion. A lot of the classrooms would have crosses in them, and pretty much everyone who went to that school was a Catholic. But I still wasn't inclined to follow any religion. I just don't think I was old enough to really think about it that much. And not that many people are, to be honest. When you are 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, you're not really pushed, or you don't really think about that at all, really. So a few months later is where everything really kicked off. I went to a school which was a bit more liberal, and it was much more accepting of me, if that makes sense. There were many more foreigners and people who weren't from Peru. So I felt a bit more accepted. But because of issues at home, I left school after about 6 months, halfway through the school year. During that summer, once I left school, during the summers, one of my friends invited me to a Catholic camp where we'd go, and it was fun. There was football, there was big gatherings, and there were a lot of people my age. It was a lot of fun, but I hated the fact that we'd have to sit down for about 2 hours a day and just listen to just stories of Bible and stuff. And especially for me, someone who, out of everyone there, I stuck out as someone who wasn't religious, who didn't like the religion that much, or didn't really think about the religion. So I was, I guess you could say, in a sense, picked on by the superiors of the group, and they tried to convert me to Christianity. I'd have hour-long chats with the leaders, I guess you could call them, where they would just try and convert me to Christianity. And I would always refuse it. I would always question a lot, which is good. Everyone should question. The next year I went back and it was even more intense, but this time, because I had a year between the two events, I'd learned a lot about religion and a lot about Christianity. So I went back, but this time with counter arguments to everything they'd try and push onto me. And there are a few doubts that I had. Some of the biggest ones were in the Christian faith, or Catholic faith, it's very common to drink wine, for example, and imagine it's the blood of Jesus Christ, or the cross would borderline be worshipped. Everyone would have a cross necklace, there'd be crosses on all the walls, which I found weird, as that's the place where Jesus got killed, supposedly. So I started to question it a lot, and I looked up the errors that I found, and I was never really satisfied with the answers. So at that point, I started to truly believe in the fact that there was no God. For me, at the time, it was a fact. And no other religion really suited me. Like, my ancestors, my Peruvian ancestors, would sacrifice humans and worship a sun, which I wasn't really up for. The Hindu religion, you would worship multiple gods, and some of which just didn't seem realistic to me. Same with the Greek mythology or many other religions. I never really looked into Islam because in the West you are sort of taught to, in a sense, fear Islam. So I would never look into it. I never read the Quran, I never bought one, I never really researched it. And I had personal beef, I guess you could say, with Christianity, but never with Islam, even though I sort of put it all into one category as religion was bad for me. This happened pretty much from when I was 13 years old all the way up until I was 24. I was a very stern atheist. At the age of 18, I booked a flight back to the UK. I wasn't allowed to leave the country in Peru until I was 18. So on my 18th birthday, I got a flight back to the UK. And I still was very atheist, possibly even more atheist than before. But in the summer of 2023, I went to a university ball where you do, the dancing and stuff. Not because I went to university, I was still a dropout at this point. And I went to this ball with no expectations. Because I owned a company, I was very strict on no women, don't get distracted, make money, do well. So I didn't really interact with many women at all for like 2 years straight. I'd reject any idea of a woman. I'd see women as a distraction, and I was very strict with that. So after 2 years of consistently rejecting any woman, on that evening during the Leeds University ball, I met someone who happened to be a Muslim, and as I spoke to them more and more, I realised that the values that they had matched a lot of the values I had. Don't drink alcohol, alcohol's a bad thing, drugs are a bad thing. Date to marry is something that I believe in a lot, but if there was one step further than that, I would agree with it. I didn't think there was a step further, but in Islam, you're not really supposed to date. You're supposed to meet someone and purely go straight into marriage. There's no such thing as really a dating phase, if that makes sense. You do get to meet them and you can get to learn about them, but there's rules that prohibit you from messing about and from taking it not seriously. So I like these traits that this person had, and I like this person a lot. They're very sweet, and we ended up dating. After, I'd say about a few months of dating, the issue of Islam came up. She was a Muslim and I was not. She had a lot of patience with me being an atheist and someone who had become really almost fanatic of atheism over the years. She would try and explain stuff to me and I'd just reject it. I wouldn't even consider her opinion. But about 3 months in, the whole topic of Islam became an issue. So I got the audiobook of the Quran. Now, my opinion of the Quran before I went into reading it was pretty bad. I thought it was an oppressive book, it was a controlling book. The only point for religion was to control the population. And I truly believed it was a dangerous book to read. So I went into it with a fairly bad vision. Now, about halfway through the second chapter, Al-Baqarah, I realised that this is not a purely religious book. It's more of a guide on how to live your life. There's not a lot of superstition. There's not a lot of stuff which is like, just believe, just believe, just believe. It's physical stuff that makes sense. It's a literal guide on how to live your life. And this surprised me a lot. So I kept on reading it, I kept on listening to it. And the first time I guess you could say consumed, because it was audiobook, I didn't read it. First time I listened to the Quran, I completed it in about 3 weeks. I'd listen to it in the gym, I'd listen to it as I was walking. All the time I'd be listening to the Quran, and in 3 weeks I completed the Quran. Now, my opinion on it had completely changed. My opinion on the whole religion had shifted. At this time, I'd broken up with my girlfriend because her dad was not very friendly towards her marrying a British guy. So we'd broken up. And one of the things that helped soothe the pain, I guess you could say, like breakups are horrible. But something that, I guess you could say, occupied that space in my mind was the Quran. So I'd listen to the audiobook all the time. Now, after completing the audiobook in 3 weeks, I bought a physical copy of the Quran that I still have to this day. I bought this. This is the Clear Quran, English transliteration, which I read over the next 2.5 months or so. After 2.5 months of reading this book, I got back from work one evening, really tired. It was a very long day of work, probably about 12 hours. I was knackered, and the first thing I did was just started reading the Quran. I read for about 2 hours, and I thought, I think I actually believe everything was making sense, and I wanted to take my Shahada. So at the time, I wasn't in contact with my ex. I don't believe in staying in contact with someone you've broken up with or had a relationship, unless there's a need for, like, unless you have kids or something where you have to. I didn't believe in staying in contact with my ex, so I didn't have her to contact. I didn't have any Muslim except for someone who I'd followed on Instagram because they had a religious page talking about Islam. And I messaged them saying, hey, I want to take my Shahada. I'm not really sure what to do. Can you help me? And at 11 p.m. on the 14th of December, 2023, I took my Shahada. Now, ever since then, there's been times where I've doubted it, but every time I've doubted it, something better happened to come into my life. I won a trip to do Umrah. On the day I most doubted the religion, I was really struggling. I went to the mosque on a Friday, listened to the sermon, and was completely distracted. Didn't really focus on what was going on. And that day was the day I doubted my choice to convert to Islam most. And on that day, I won a trip to Umrah, which is, for those that don't know, the laps around the Kaaba where you go all the way to Saudi Arabia and walk around the black box. And a few more things. I got it completely free, and many literal, not miracles, but close to miracles have happened in my life. I've made dua a lot, which dua is a way of asking for Allah for stuff, where you just ask for anything. A lot of them were unrealistic, and a lot of them came true. And in that time, I've read more than I ever would about the religion. I interestingly have studied more about Christianity and Judaism and some other religions. And Islam is the one that makes the most sense. It's the story that makes sense. And it's not even that it makes the most sense, it just makes sense. The others have gaps in them, and I struggle to believe it. And you can tell in certain parts that is man sort of fabricated, whereas Islam, it's so unlikely to be fabricated by man, by humankind, I guess you could say. It's the Quran, for example, even reading it in English, which isn't the official language of the Quran, and any English copy of the Quran isn't considered a Quran, just to preserve the original Arabic. Even in English, it's a special book. And now it's been coming up to 8 years since I reverted to Islam, and it was the best decision, it is the best decision I've ever made in my life. If you are considering converting to Islam and you need some more information, follow me on Instagram, subscribe to this page, as I'll be posting more videos as frequently as I can. And if you have recently converted to Islam or want to know more information, I've actually started up a community where you can message people, comment, post, interact with other people learning about Islam. We have Saturday coffee groups where we online all group up together and just chat about Islam. Arabic courses, Quran courses. So if you want to join that, click the link down below and you can join the community. Yalla, bye.